Hey, Terry Allred here. Today, I want to talk about a common issue that comes up when I start talking about being trauma informed or being a trauma informed leader. People who are at my trainings or in conversation with me always say, yes, I get it. I understand the principles. I think it's a great idea. But the problem is, if I said the words trauma informed, everybody would run screaming in my workplace. you know, that is, it's true. And it's something that I struggle with all the time. What language to use around the principles of being trauma informed, because trauma can be such a triggering and inflammatory word. So I wanted to take some time today to think about it and spend some time analyzing what does it mean. I'd love to hear your thoughts if there's any other terminology you think would be great to be used. You know, for so many workplaces, even using the word trauma as applied to itself feels too heavy. Now, lots of us work in trauma, lots of us help other people who have experienced trauma, but using trauma to describe leadership or to describe workplace dynamics can feel way too clinical, or too far removed from the daily work that folks are often doing. And so it is a real concern. So the challenge is that the word trauma informed is both accurate and loaded. So, for some people, they feel like if they're talking about trauma, then they're delving into the realm of therapy. Well, that's not actually it at all, but we need to be able to explain that for folks to be able to understand. So while the principles of being trauma informed often resonate, the language doesn't. So let's think about what are the primary principles of being trauma informed in the workplace and as a leader, and how might we language around them differently so that folks could hear what we're talking about and respond to the concepts as opposed to the word trauma. So, um, the biggest secret behind being trauma informed is you don't actually have to say that you're trauma informed to be trauma informed. You can live by the principles. You can lead by the principles of being trauma informed. So, what are some of those principles? Well, the principles for being trauma informed in the workplace really came from being trauma informed in client care. And so it was originally a concept that was used in a therapeutic context, but we are at this point really taking it out of therapy and onto how do we deal with people, how do we interact with people, how do we respect people who are whole people, and not expect folks to leave any stresses or past experiences at the door when they come into work. I mean, certainly that's how I was trained, way back when, but that's just not realistic, and it never has been realistic. So, what can we talk about? Well, psychological safety is one thing we can talk about. It's not exactly the same as being trauma informed, but it is very much in the popular workplace vocabulary right now. Professor Amy Edmondson did the original coinage of this term, and there's a lot of academic research around it. There's a lot of practical workplace research around it. Basically, it just means how safe do people feel to speak up, to even disagree without fear of humiliation or punishment. So it's a good bit more complex than that, and we'll talk about that in a subsequent video. But talking about psychological safety is really talking about the cultural context or the environmental context is a group phenomenon. So, do people treat each other in a way that allows them to feel safe to show up at work? Is the culture of the workplace growth oriented? Is the environment um, open to learning from mistakes rather than punishing mistakes. So we can use the word psychological safety to talk about what happens when we show up using trauma informed principles. We can also talk about clarity. One of the things that we know about trauma and being activated in a stress response or a trauma or threat response is that we become very unclear because of the neurological things that are going on. And so, clarity and boundaries are both a part of being trauma informed and a part of creating a safe and respectful workplace. So we can talk about clarity. We can talk about predictability. Do your policies and procedures create predictability so people know what to expect? That in itself is being trauma informed. What about maybe we talk about modeling? Regulation is a word that sometimes people use. It can be misunderstood and used in an oppressive way. We might talk about regulation as how a person is able to modulate their emotions and their ability to be calm when they want to be calm, but it can also be weaponized as a oppressive tool of you can't express your emotions because you need to be calm or regulated in the capitalistic professional ideal of what that might look like in the workplace. But regulation and modeling in terms of healthy stress management, prioritizing well being, leaders can model those things as a way to give implicit permission, not just explicit permission, for their workers to do the same thing. Choice and voice are a huge part of being trauma informed in your life and in the workplace. So, our staff being invited to participate in decisions, or even in conversations, especially during conflict, especially during significant change. So instead of using the word trauma, we can use words that might be more easily might easily land in professional situations. So I often use the word adversity because everybody has experienced adversity. I'm not trying to make a clinical similarity between adversity and trauma because we're not talking about clinical language here. We're talking about, in general, people's life experiences have all included adversity and similar constellations of stress and patterns of neurophysiological adaptation can come from adversity, as can come from chronic stress or trauma. Chronic stress is another word, or two words that we can use when we maybe don't want to talk about trauma, but we do want to capture a chronic, um, resistant, maybe ongoing, uh, significant problem. So, chronic stress is when there's no relief from the stress. You're just staying in overfunctioning or you're staying in underfunctioning the whole time. And really, everybody can relate to chronic stress as well. So, that's a high recognizable workplace challenge, and it is a term that you can use in lieu of saying trauma informed. You can talk about chronic stress in the workplace. There's also a good bit of managerial and leadership language already around high pressure environments. And so you can talk about high pressure environments and you can discuss hallmarks of those high pressure environments, which might also be the same hallmarks as we might talk about in trauma informed um, environments. And so things like the chronic stress, things like constant change, things like unpredictability, those are all elements of high pressure environments that are also elements of how trauma can be activated and show up in the workplace. So, same concepts, different language, potentially better reception. So, why does this matter? And really, it matters because at the end of the day, being trauma informed isn't about a label, It's about a practice. It's about creating environments where humans can thrive, even when adversity, chronic stress, and crisis hit. So, if dropping the term trauma informed helps the work land more effectively, it's not dilution, it's just translation. So, I hope as you are thinking about how you discuss being trauma informed in your workplace and your leadership, this might help you by expanding your awareness of vocabulary and principles. Let me know what you think. Let me know what words you use. I'd love to hear from you directly. Thank you.